Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Welcome back to the Dominion Podcast, episode 54. Good to be back in the Upper 40 studio.
Good to be back.
Yeah. How you doing?
I'm doing well.
How's dinner?
Yeah, dinner was good. You've learned not to ask me about like the day before or definitely not the week. It's like, how was the last half hour of your life?
Yeah, I know you should be able to remember that, at least what you had for dinner. But,
dinner was good.
Hey, we're glad to be here tonight. We've got a very special guest this week. I'm going to let, you've got her bio. You going to read the bio?
Yeah, I'm going to introduce her.
Yeah, okay. You go ahead and do that.
Yeah, so this week we've been talking about this guest for a long time. We've done probably more hype for this guest than anyone we've ever had on, which is two other people. And we're happy to have Laura Klassen with us tonight. And she leads a ministry, Choice42, which we have... 42, sorry. 42. And we have familiarized ourselves a little bit with it and got to know her from a distance over the last little while. And if you're in Canada listening to this, most of our listeners are, there's not a lot in the quote unquote pro-life or abolitionist, depending on how you want to identify yourself, movements, people who are against the killing of innocent children. This is a very different situation than America. And I think for Canadians, we often listen to and learn from, appreciate a lot of our American brothers and sisters and the work that they're doing. But it's hard to find faithful and effective groups in Canada. Yeah. And it sounds like, Laura, you can explain a bit more of what you do. And that is certainly not limited at all to Canada, but you are more familiar with the situation on the ground than, someone like Durban might be, et cetera, et cetera. So we thought it'd be good to have Laura on and just keep driving this home. I mean, I think conservatives and Christians, as Christians, we of course value life. And every Christian I've ever talked to has in theory been against abortion. I've never personally talked to someone who professed faith who was, for killing children. But at the same time, it feels as though there's an impotence and there's an uncertainty regarding what can be done on the ground here.
I feel that myself. You see the vastness of this complex of baby murder, and you're like, what am I supposed to do about this? Yeah. But that's just the wrong attitude. So we want to talk about what it is you're doing, some of the great work you're doing, and then maybe some practical stuff that we can actually get into.
So maybe we could start, Laura, by just letting our listeners know your background a little bit, specifically why and how did you personally, get skin in the game in this fight? What led to that?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. This is really cool to be talking to two Canadian guys about this issue. Mm-hmm. So I first became aware of what abortion was when I was a little kid, very little, and I saw someone holding a graphic abortion image on the side of the road, and that image stuck with me my whole life. And I always felt really bothered by abortion, and I did all of my projects in school year after year on abortion and like my debates in high school. And then I went to university and continued on with that. And I was looking around thinking, okay, like how can I get involved here in Canada? Where are the organizations that I can join in with? And I started looking, and there was nothing there like what I was looking for. So that's kind of why I started Choice42. Yes. At the same time, I was volunteering at a local crisis pregnancy center because I figured, these people are doing something about it. And so that's where I started. And while I was there, I figured out a lot. I realized a lot. I figured out how to not talk to women who are considering abortion and how to actually do it effectively. And I really wanted to help Canadians. It did start out as a Canadian organization, and, now we're worldwide, but Canadians really didn't know that we don't have an abortion law to start with.
Yeah.
Everyone in their mind is like, no, the cutoff is, 12 weeks or 24 weeks, or they all think there's something, but there's not. So I just wanted to create awareness for that within Canada, and that all of that together is kind of what Choice42 came out of. So,
okay, there's a lot that I want to talk about from that. Let's go back to the beginning, because I still remember in high school when there was I'm 36, so this was like 20 years ago. And I remember there was an announcement made that there were protesters out front and that we ought to, I don't know if they like canceled lunch or told us not to look out the windows. There was some, the teachers were made aware and they told the students, don't go outside. And it was, 10 old ladies holding graphic images. And
sounds threatening.
Yeah, sounds threatening. But what's fascinating to me is that that was such a potent thing for you in your life. Just exposure to the truth, exposure to the reality, not the euphemisms, not the language games of pro-choice. It's like, no, what is the reality in stark images? Mm-hmm. And as a young person, that was potent. And it makes me think, one, this is an effective strategy, because we're told that that's not, and really that feels like we're just being shamed. Like, oh, don't do that because it'll offend people. It's like, well,
it will offend them.
Yeah. Ripping kids apart is an offensive thing.
But that's why it's effective. I mean, generally the opposition doesn't tell you to stop doing something that's ineffective. They only tell you to stop doing things that are effective.
Right.
But it's not just the opposition telling you to stop. It's other Christians saying that this isn't effective. It's funny because at this point, I'm doing every single thing that Christians told me not to do.
Yes.
So, because it's effective.
Well, I feel like this is a similar theme to the things that Jared and I have talked about, even just with the church. Over the last, we've talked about the idea of winsomeness being this highest virtue that we ought to strive for, and an effective witness is synonymous with people liking us, and those are Canadian values. Those aren't Christian values, and the same thing happens in the pro-life movement, that we're told by the world that we can't make people uncomfortable, that we have to be winsome, that we have to not make anyone upset. And then, so the world kind of determines for us the field of battle and the rules by which we must play.
And we decide that we're going to play by their rules.
Yeah. And we surrender that ground. And what you get is you get a silenced movement. You have an impotent movement.
Yeah. I think a lot of that comes from the way we view the women, though. Right. Because we view them as victims, we think we have to speak a certain way. Right. I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit, and maybe what your approach is. You said you learned the wrong way to do it and the right way. So what is the right way?
Well, I think now, I was told you cannot... Well, this was a pregnancy crisis center, right? And they have charitable status. And so I was straight up told, you actually aren't supposed to say that abortion's wrong. Yeah. You're definitely not supposed to say it's murder. Yeah. You're just kind of supposed to present 3 options of parenting, adoption, or abortion. Yeah. And then you're somehow supposed to hype up parenting and adoption. Yes. And then without actually saying anything bad about abortion, have them not choose abortion. And I remember the first woman that I talked to when I first started volunteering, number 1, she came in, I talked with her in the ways that I'd been taught, and she called the next day and said that she was having the abortion. And I was just like, but I did what I was supposed to do. And then I was thinking about it and I was like, no, I didn't, because that child's life was on the line. And the counseling is also, they tell you keep it woman focused. It's about her. It's about her problems. Don't really talk about the baby. She's going to see the baby as an enemy at this point, if she even thinks of it as a baby. And so I think that's completely wrong. So
isn't that the problem though?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we humanize the baby first off, with all the language that we use. And yes, we say it's murder. And the whole idea of women being victims is just not true. There's been, a small amount of, I would say, very young people who we've talked to, whose parents were like basically forcing them. These are like 13 and 14-year-olds. And in that sense, they are somewhat more of victims, right? As opposed to like this 20-year-old who's like, well, I don't want to give up this in my life, or, you know, and then they make it seem hard, or like, I can't pay rent. So I have to murder my child, when it's like, well, if you had a 1-year-old and you couldn't pay rent, the answer would not be murdering your 1-year-old.
Of course.
Like, the answer is beyond murdering people. So a lot of the time they're really not victims, and like, sad to say, like they're quite angry and like also very nasty about it sometimes too, because like we've had a number of women now who wanted to abort and did abort because of vacation plans, and they didn't want the pregnancy messing with the vacation plans. Like that's how low this goes. So these aren't victims. The
illusion of what's safe, legal, and rare kind of thing is just a total illusion. And I've always thought this whole dynamic between men and women, the cultural rule is that women are victims, and they're especially the victims of men. And pregnancy is just an example of that. But it precludes men from having a voice in this. Almost off the bat, like I mean, I've had people even the last month tell me no uterus, no voice, or whatever they say, no uterus, no opinion. And what I find as a father of 2 daughters is this constant victimization of women is actually profoundly patronizing. Like you don't present yourself as a strong woman while simultaneously adopting a victim mentality as you oppress victims. Like, that's not a strong woman. A strong woman is someone who stands in the gap of and advocates for the weak and the vulnerable at expense to herself. And women today are raised to feel as though a strong woman is someone who defends her own rights even at the expense of others. And Christians need to reframe this whole narrative. And you're right, if Christian pregnancy centers and counselors are affirming those flawed and harmful and wicked assumptions about women, I mean, they're perpetuating the problem.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was on the board of the pregnancy center for a couple of years here in town too. And I can resonate with, I think when you take the king's money, you become the king's man. And I think pregnancy centers have been totally castrated because of their charitable status.
Right.
And what we need, I think what needs to happen in Canada, and I'll just say it, is pregnancy centers have to drop the charitable status tomorrow. Because if the only reason you have it is to receive donations, and I can't see another reason for it. 2 things. One, if you're actually self-censoring yourself for the sake of money, that's not a good look. It's not good for a church to do that. It's not good for especially a pregnancy center. The second thing is, this is a cause that is worthy of our support.
Yeah,
regardless of our status. And if Christians are not going to support this as an important ministry, you know, regardless of your status, then they're not really behind it, and there's still a lot of work to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the elephant in the room, because I remember there's laws about, I remember that too, Laura, like what you can say, what you can't say, how you can frame it. We always have to present the option. And I remember thinking, how are we a Christian organization promoting abortion?
Yeah.
Like, you know?
Yes. And that's why, like, with Choice for Two, we, at first we're like, of course, like that's what you do. You go and you get charitable status. And so, but then when we looked into it, and then when I realized that our hands would be tied and we wouldn't be able to say the things, we were like, no way. And then our funding is just fine. Like if you really, if you trust God to take care of it, and He does. But it's interesting because so many Canadians will email us being like, I'd love to support you, but you don't have charitable status, so like,
I can't get a tax break.
Guess you don't care about it.
No, they're like, if you ever get it, then, you know, we'll be happy to donate. And I'm like, wow. Meanwhile, it's the Americans who are like, they don't care about a tax receipt. And so it's just like, Canada is just so pathetic in so many ways. Like, but the charitable status is something that needs to end.
Yeah.
So how do you actually reach out to women who are considering this? Because it sounds like that's primarily what you're doing, is almost like a one-to-one counseling and trying to convince people. So how do you do that?
Basically, they just message us, and it works in a whole bunch of different ways. We have been, you know, blessed to have a huge social media presence, and our reach is very large, mostly due to our videos that we've made. So women will watch those videos and then message us. Also, because our name is Choice42, they're not quite clear as to, you know, we have women hoping that we'll be able to help them get abortions. And so we start the conversation that way. But we're very upfront that we're anti-abortion. Yeah. Like right off the bat. But the name kind of, you know, brings some other people to us, which is really cool. And a lot of it now, shrewd.
Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of at this point, a lot of it is word of mouth, that a person finds out they're pregnant, and people are like, oh, like, you should message Choice42, which is awesome. So so we're not actively going out and finding people. We were for a time like targeting people with ads and stuff online, but we are no longer allowed to do that through any Google or any social media. We've been blocked on all of them. So it's really an organic thing now. Mm-hmm.
This is a curious thing. Sorry, I'm gonna keep asking questions here until you can get a leg up on me. I've been watching videos the last couple of days of some of the abortion mill ministry that the End Abortion Now guys are doing. And it's insane to me that people are, I mean, I can see why they would be gung-ho for letting people have abortions, but they're actively opposed to you even suggesting that somebody think about not getting one. Like it's crazy. They're just crazy about that. Like, even suggesting that somebody goes and finds help or gets counsel is like, no, don't do that. They need to have the choice. It's like, well, I'm not making them make a choice. I'm giving them at least the option to think about it. Right. I guess.
I mean, I don't know. People just like hate babies.
Yeah.
Like, seriously. And because a lot of the trolls that I have, they will. They call themselves trolls, so I have no problem calling them trolls. But they come at me all the time being like, well, you're forcing women to gestate and all this. And I'm like, I'm not hunting women down. Like, they're messaging me. Yeah. And I'm not hiding the fact that I'm anti-abortion. Yeah. So, like, what do you mean I'm forcing someone?
You didn't get them pregnant either.
Well,
no.
But I think you hit on the crux of the issue. And we talk about this. Women's human rights now in general with expressive individualism are defined by one's ability to express oneself or autonomous expression. So with women, this is especially potent. So the culture has put together this idea that if you are a woman and in order to have any value and worth and rights, you must be free to express yourself how you wish. Yeah. And abortion, I think, is such a lightning rod issue. Yes, people hate children, but I would say even more than they hate children, they love themselves. And it's really like, who's going to be in control of my life, and who's going to tell me what to do? And there's a narrative that's been going around. I mean, feminism, even first wave, but second wave, third wave, is promoting this idea that not only should women have freedom and rights in certain areas, but freedom is the freedom to be fully free, to be autonomous. And we've talked about that before. So so then it's like, well, I think you should, give your baby up for adoption, and that's translated into, then you are requiring me to do something. And that means that I'm being oppressed. Right. And so, I mean, there's no way to get around the fact that a pregnancy is a burden, right? There's a responsibility there. And I think that responsibility is what is resented. And we've been telling women for 60, 80 years that they should resent it. They should resent burdens that are placed upon them, burdens that they don't choose. Those are wrong. And, we need to tell our girls, we need to yell to the culture that's a lie. Love requires taking upon ourselves burdens of responsibility for other people. That's what it is, at expense to ourselves. So I think the abortion issue is really just like, and I'm not trying to be overstated, but like it is the fullest expression of unbelief. It's just hatred for another. It's a resentment for limits and responsibilities.
Well, it's a hatred of God and his order, right?
Yeah.
Like you rightly said that it's a burden. Being pregnant is a burden. Nobody would deny that.
Yeah.
But it's a burden imposed by God and his creation.
Yeah. So this is encouraging though, Laura, because when I was at the pregnancy center, one thing we were trying to do, and I've met lovely people both at this pregnancy center and who work in pregnancy centers, and people who really care about the women and really care about the children. And anyways, one of the struggles we had, which every pregnancy center does, is realizing that we're being totally ineffective at preventing abortion. And the reason we're ineffective, like we hand out diapers and we give out food for people who choose, they were going to keep their child anyways, most likely.
Right.
And the reason for that, the data that I was given was upwards, I think above 80% of women who kill their children choose to do so within 24 hours of confirmation of pregnancy. And so the reason we were thinking of transitioning to a medical model whereby you have a clinic and you're able to offer medical services is so that you're providing meaningful services for women, but you're also in proximity to women when they are statistically going to be making that decision. And so that was kind of the rationale behind a lot of pregnancy centers in Canada moving away from just the diapers and, the baby food and the informal counseling, because that's good, but if the goal is to prevent abortion, that's not, those are two different things. But what Laura is saying is that Laura is actually coming into contact with people when they are at that point,
right? When
that decision is being made. And that's, like, I've just never even heard of that. So is that kind of like your mission at Choice42, is to be in that preventative dialogue? Like that's the space that you are intentionally getting to, or you just happen to find yourself there?
No, that was a goal. Like, I found being at the Pregnancy Resource Center that there weren't a lot of people coming in.
Yeah.
People didn't even know the center existed.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, this is not reaching the people who are finding out that they're pregnant. Like sometimes it did, but not anywhere near, the number 300 abortions a day or whatever it is. So, and then I'm like, well, we have online now. This is a great way, especially to reach the younger generation.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So one of I feel like this is a strategy that we need to really pick up on. One of the concerns I have, or one of the, not the dangers, but an opposition to this, is just censorship. I mean, I'm almost amazed to hear that you have an online ministry that gets in touch with vulnerable women and prevents them from abortions. It's like, that can happen these days.
We're so heavily censored. It's ridiculous.
Right.
But it's still working. Like, we're getting around it. We can't do things like, they won't take our money to let us promote our organization.
Sure.
And so we just rely on people sharing our stuff.
Yeah.
And like I said, the videos have been hugely helpful with that.
Yeah. So have you found, I don't know how it all works, like with shadow banning and stuff like that. Like, have you experienced that? I'm sure you must have.
Yeah.
Being so high profile.
Yeah. We've experienced everything. Like, although like our accounts are all like restricted.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means because we still have a lot of views and stuff. I think I'm like one error away from being banned from Facebook, which would really suck because we obviously like we're reaching so many people that way.
Of course.
But I mean, what can you do? And just the most ridiculous things. It just goes to show how against us they are. Like to the point where I've had like threats, full-on threats of like me being lit on fire or me being beheaded or me being stabbed or shot or like all these different ones. People write this with their picture, with their actual name on it, and I'll report that to Facebook, and Facebook's like, no, this doesn't violate our standards. Yet I write something like abortion is murder. Yeah. And then, you're banned for a week because you can't be saying this.
Yeah. Hey, don't kill your babies. Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah.
Horrible.
It's completely one way, this censorship thing.
Yes, of course. Really, so there's a motivation then for, I mean, here's a good example of why Christians should care about free speech. And it's not just because we're selfish people. It's because the ability to speak freely is one of the main ways that we can speak for the voiceless. And I mean, this is an amazing example of, she is literally, unless something has changed, she is interacting with women at a time in their life where no one's been able to do that, especially in Canada. Like in the States, you can stand outside the clinic, you can be a physical presence, but we can't, I don't think we're allowed to do that here.
100 feet, 100 meters, or what is it?
They're all different.
Okay.
The different zones of like what you can apply for and what you can get, but they're big. They're to the point where you would have no idea that the woman walking past you is going to go into the clinic way down there.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of my questions, just thinking out loud, is to say you're shut down. There's this bill, especially in Canada, this bill goes through that Trudeau wants to do, where we only get liberal propaganda. And I feel like the principle behind what you're doing is like, we need to fight hard to be in proximity with women when they're making these decisions. And so what do you think are some ways, like going back to what you said first, I mean, there actually is value in having these signs. For example, I mean, we have people in our city who march around, elderly people, and they've done it for years, maybe decades. And I think even I've thought, like, how effective is that? It's like, well, at least they're still putting the truth out there.
Yeah, there's a prophetic voice happening there, whether it accomplishes the aims you think it should accomplish or not.
But maybe my specific question, Laura, is, have you thought about, if that happens, like what a pivot looks like for you guys, as far as like, how would we still try to connect with these people?
Not really.
Yeah.
It's just like, I guess, one step at a time, and we'll see what happens. Like, I don't think people fully realize how much we lost with the bubble zone laws.
Okay.
Like, that was just devastating.
Yeah.
To be able to, these American pastors are out every week. And, it seems like every day they'll be reporting that at least maybe 1 and up to like 5 or 6 children are saved.
Yes.
That's massive.
Yeah.
We can't do that in the same way, though. I do think, now that like I've been thinking about it, probably do need to be just outside the bubble zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
With all our stuff.
Yeah.
And like, it will be way harder and way more frustrating, but still worth it, I think.
It's like, you need to, there's different strategies, but in the least, there needs to be that prophetic witness to the truth. It's like, okay, we may not be able to be, in the hospital room when the doctor is asking you, do you want to keep it? Which they literally do now to everyone. Like, multiple people in my church, fully healthy, they go to their first checkup, and like one of the first questions is, do you want to keep it? It's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, what's the alternative?
What happened to first do no harm?
Yeah.
Do you want to kill my baby or deliver my baby?
But there's a value in doing anything you can to keep shedding a light on this. Because as soon as that stops, the conscience of the culture is just more seared, right?
Yeah, and the whole idea that this happens largely in the hospitals, from what I understand. I don't know. I know there's probably some clinics in some of the bigger cities, but do you know what the ratio would be of abortions performed at hospitals versus the clinics would be?
I'm not sure the ratio exactly, but from what I know from like talking to women and stuff, I think it's way more in the clinics, like way more. And the hospitals, it seems, have like a abortion day, which is usually Saturday. And some hospitals, it's Friday. So it's like 1 day a week kind of doing these. But the clinics are open 7 days a week and just pumping them out. And most of the women that I talk to are going to the clinics. They'll travel into the city. Because you don't need, like, if you're going to get an abortion at a hospital, you need a referral from your doctor. Okay. Right? It's like a couple steps. Whereas if you want to abort at a clinic, you just pick up the phone and make your appointment done.
Wow.
Right.
Are these private clinics? Or are they public?
No, they're funded by our tax dollars. So we pay for this.
It's sickening.
Yeah, it is sickening.
Yeah. I was listening to one of your talks recently, and you were talking about the bubble law and how, maybe it's time to get back out there, and maybe we just have to break the law. Yeah, maybe somebody's got to get arrested.
Yeah. Well, we know a guy.
Al? I volunteer Al. But yeah, we had Pastor Jacob Rioma on last week, and I remember him saying at the beginning of the pandemic regarding the church closures, he's like, some pastor's going to have to go to jail for us to actually be able to make a point on this. And there might be an analogy here of, maybe we just have to push the boundary a little bit and try and bring this to the forefront.
Yeah. Well, in the least, we need to not let the world determine the nature of the conflict. Right. And that's one thing we've been doing for decades is we need to start saying, baby murder. And we need to never use euphemisms, and we don't enter into dialogue. Like, imagine someone said, imagine in our city, they were every Saturday morning at the train station, they were loading up, the Syrian refugees and shipping them off to some camp to, exterminate them. And imagine we were opposed to that, and we entered into a dialogue with people about whether or not, like you would say, rightly, I mean, are you a racist? Like, how much do you even care about stopping this? Like, you don't enter into a dialogue. You don't treat people as victims who do this type of thing. And so I think even just using the appropriate language, like Laura said, when we talk about this, like, this is murder. And go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, to that point, like, we're going to stand before God, and God's going to be like, this many babies died right where you were on your watch, and you did nothing. And we're going to be like, but the bubble zone.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Like, it's quite shameful.
Yeah. To stand against injustice and oppression is always costly. And I think we've talked about this before, that the way that we learn history in Canada is that there's some really bad people in the world, and you're a good person, and you need to beat them. And you are the hero. And part of the way that's perpetuated is because Canada, so young, 150 years, and all the major conflict, I would say a lot of them, we have been on the right side.
And they've been overseas, so you come back to town, you get a parade, you're on everybody's shoulders.
Yeah, and we are, like, we did have the moral high ground on a lot of these issues, but that's not the way the human nature really is, and we have this narrative whereby we expect that the oppressor, this view of Hitler as if Hitler took over Germany, for example. It's like, okay, Hitler was one of the people involved in this, but Hitler himself did not exterminate 6 million Jews. a lot of people were on board with that. A lot of people went along with that. A lot of people actively participated, but even more people sat around and didn't do what they needed to do in order to stop it. And so there's this narrative of oppression and how you will stop it. It's like you'll just have this perfect moment where it'll be clear to you and you will be viewed as a hero and the villain will be obvious. But in the real world, often the people who stand against the oppressors are viewed as oppressors, right? And the people who stand up for the afflicted and the vulnerable and the voiceless are viewed as moral reprobates. And it was true with Jesus. He's a drunkard and a glutton, right? He's a friend of sinners and tax collectors. Like, he's an immoral person.
And their view of him didn't change after he went to the cross and did the greatest thing in history.
Yeah,
right.
They didn't throw the parade.
They didn't start going rah rah rah.
No.
They still hated him, and they still do.
Yeah.
Right. So I get overwhelmed, like, when I think about this issue, because it's, like I said off the top, it's such a behemoth.
Yeah.
And when I see what you're doing, it's encouraging. And I know there's ways people can contribute to what you're doing or get on board. I know you put out calls when a woman decides to keep the baby. There's like a registry that you guys put up for them, so people can find you on Twitter and donate to those things. But what do you think the church should be doing? I guess maybe just anything. But do you have any advice for practical stuff for the Canadian church? Like
anything.
Where do we start? I mean,
I know it's so discouraging. Like, I'm friends with a number of American pastors. I was talking with one of them yesterday, and he's just like Canada, it's just so bad because we don't even, like, there's so few pastors that are even willing to talk about it. And, like, you're one of them, Alex, and I could probably count them on my hand. Like, as to, I mean, obviously I don't know everyone, but just not even talking about it within their congregation. It's such a taboo topic. Like, oh no, we don't need to be political. We don't need to protest anything. That's not what Christians are called to. Like, it's just so bad. I wish that pastors would just, like, wake up, because it's child sacrifice. And so we should be fighting that as Christians. Yeah. And, like, I don't even know, like, what the first step is, but, like, I'm thankful that there's at least five, and hopefully from there, it will expand, and they'll start doing, because did I tell you guys about, like, when we started Choice42?
No.
6 years ago, and our thinking was like, oh, we will send out an email to every, I think we sent to every, like, evangelical church that we could within Canada that we could get our hands on. So we sent out a lot of emails, and I can't remember the exact number, but we got something like 1 or 2 responses back being like, hey, good job, guys. This is a good thing. Mostly it was silence. And then, more than the encouraging emails, we got emails from pastors saying, show me in the Bible where it says abortion is wrong. Go to hell. It's
funny, that's what they're going to be doing.
Well, Christians shouldn't be oppressing women. Like, that's, wow. and then I was like, okay, like, this is not going to go in the way that I thought. I thought that we would have support from the church, and we didn't. So it's been bad. It's still bad. Well,
so I think Laura's highlighting the fact that what's really needed, the problem is not that we're not engaged. That's not the problem. The problem is that there is rank unbelief pervading the church. And if this is what the prophets talked about in Amos, like when they're confronted for their injustice, true social injustice, and their lack of concern for the poor and the downtrodden, and their complicitness with the oppression of the needy, the rebuke is for their unbelief and their idolatry, and the response is repentance. And I think the same reason the church is not more engaged in this issue is the same reason it closed its doors for 2 years. It's the same reason it ignores the affliction of their own sheep and the isolation that they're going to face and the harm that will cause to them. It's turning a blind eye to that which is costly. I mean, these arguments about not being political, like I wrote early on, it's like, it's funny how the people who say don't be political are doing everything the politicians tell them. Right? Yeah. It's like, and then the guys who say maybe don't do what the politicians say are the political ones.
Yeah.
It's like, but let's think about that. But there's a connection between these two things. And I just think it's cowardice and it's adopting Canadian values over biblical values. And the solution is repentance. Like, we're not going to have Christians involved in the abolition of abortion until there's a revival in the church.
Yeah.
And there's just no way around it.
Yeah, there needs to be wholesale repentance. I mean, the city we live in, Peterborough, is about roughly 80,000 people.
Yeah.
And that's roughly the amount of babies that are aborted in Canada every year.
Wow.
So you think, like, basically a city the size of Peterborough is being murdered every year. The most helpless people. Mm-hmm. Like, sometimes we need to put this in perspective. And I know you've done a lot of this work, showing people what abortion really is.
Yeah.
It's not, like you said, it's not just euphemisms. Mm-hmm. It's not like you're removing a tumor. It's, here's what happens during the procedure. And you can actually visualize it, and it's horrific.
Yeah.
I think we need to shock ourselves out of this complacency, mm-hmm. repent, and I don't know what to do, but we got to do something. And my motto is just do something and figure it out as you go. Because usually you don't get the right thing the first time, and you'll figure out what doesn't work. And yeah, I don't know. That's all I got. I got to repent, and we got to do something.
Well, we need to. Do you want to add to that, Laura?
Oh, no, like, it really does come down to that, because, like, yeah, you assume it's going to be Christians fighting it, and then Christians aren't even touching it.
Yeah. So
that is the problem, because, like, yeah, it's, and then, so what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a costly battle, especially in Canada. I think in the States it's a little different because they have, there's more publicity. You can be seen as virtuous in certain quarters if you are fighting against abortion. Like, there's people who will encourage and celebrate you. But you're really working against the grain in Canada. If you were going to be not private, like, people are cool. And this is, I think, why they support pregnancy centers. It's so Canadian. It's like, I do think this is wrong. I think we should do something, but just not too loud. Right. So, well, it's like, hey, no one knows we're here. It's like, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, because you're not effective. Yeah, I gave my money to the pregnancy center. I'm doing my part.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we just, that part of us that wants the approval of men, that thinks an effective witness means people like us, that just needs to die. And Canadian Christians need to get used to a costly discipleship, is I think what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to ask Laura if there's any projects she has coming down the pipeline that she wants to talk about, or, basically if someone wants to learn more about Choice42, what should they do?
Yeah, so for sure. Choice42, they could just go to our website, Choice42, like the numbers 4 and 2, .com. Or, we're on all the social media platforms. And then, yes, we have a big new project that we're working on, which is a series of animated shorts. It's called Exposed. And right now we're working on the first episode, which features Kevin Sorbo. And it's basically, it's a true story of a medical professional who witnessed a baby being ripped apart via ultrasound. Wow. He was the ultrasound tech. And so it's a true story. It's his story, and it's horrific. And I also find that, if you've seen any animated videos of abortion, the baby never moves or reacts to what is happening.
Right.
Which really bugs me because, you know, this is one of the most brutal things that you could do to a human. Yeah. And from everything I've heard from people who've witnessed it, the baby is very much reacting in pain and trying to get away from the abortion's instruments. So we just thought, like, our whole series Exposed, I was like, we're just going all in. We're going to actually show everything. Like, it's going to be awful. Yeah, so that's our new project. And, you know, we cover different topics related to abortion, like IVF, the fetal cell lines that were used for vaccines, stuff like that. Yeah.
One of the things that the Allies did following the wars, they marched out villagers around the concentration camps to see, like, this happen. And you need to look at this. And if you're not going to acknowledge that this is what happened, then it's probably going to happen again. And I think that's what we need to do with abortion. We need to just say, this is what it is. And you're welcome to try and defend this, but you're going to defend it for what it is, not hide behind what it isn't. And yeah, well, we'll pray for that, Laura. And, you know, we pray that this gets a wide viewership. I was going to say, on an encouraging note, we had a pastor from Texas reach out to ask if they could use our statement on abortion for their church and to pass it along. And I say that to encourage. It can feel like just an uphill battle. It's like, we're in Canada, we're not allowed to say anything. You know, we got problems in church, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That letter, our associate pastor, Ben, a wonderful wordsmith and a godly man, penned that thing. And
very good.
Yeah, it's really good. And it was so helpful and effective, and it got some steam. And it's funny because we read it and we're like, but isn't this what we all think? You know, I mean, Ben writes very well. But I think we realized, look, just speak, keep acting, keep speaking, and it will make an impact, and it can make a difference. And the Lord works through the minority. And that's the other lie. We're made to feel as though we can't do anything because it's a huge problem and we're small. It's like, what? We're Christians. Like, every problem we've ever faced is bigger than us, so to speak. But this is to make us depend on the God who raises the dead. And like, God's not asking us to gain the numbers needed to, you know, overthrow, you know, the like through a democratic process. He's content to take a few faithful men and women who will tell the truth and to use them to change the world. And it's what Paul did in his missionary journeys, and it's what happened in Ephesus, and it's what happened to the world. This little group of people, 120 people in an upper room, went on to transform the world because of the message that they believed and preached. And we have to believe that. Like, we literally have to believe that even if the three of us were the only people in Canada who thought this was wrong, with the Lord on our side, we literally have enough to overthrow the whole thing. We do. And yes, it's hard to see how that would happen. And God uses means, and we would try to get people involved. But, like, do we believe that the word of the Lord is that potent? Right? That if we will simply commit ourselves to speaking and to acting and letting the chips fall where they may, like, God can do that. It's not like we just get to a tipping point where we don't need God anymore. You know, where we got this. There's enough backing. There's enough support. It's like, we're always way out of our league.
Right.
And he's pleased to work there. And what a victory that would be.
So you're saying we need to be like David and just waltz out there and go, who are these uncircumcised Philistines that are defying the armies of the living
clowns?
God?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what needs to happen. You know, whittling down the army. Like, there's too many of us. You know, there's 3 of us in this room. Wow, that's way too many.
Get out, Jeremy.
Yeah, Jeremy, get out.
Well, I would be the obvious choice for the first one to go. I'm off the island. Do you have time for one more question? I know you may have some other responsibilities to get to, but I was following the recent law that almost got passed in Louisiana. That was a really great law. And I think this is something Christians need to realize, is that the pro-life organizations are generally not on our side. And it's hard for people to understand. But when you see them actively fight against legislation that would legalize or end abortion, that we have to wake up to that. So I don't know if you have any more to add to that. But.
Oh boy, yeah. That's like, yeah, that's why I ditched the pro-life label. I mean, there's a couple of reasons, and we just call ourselves anti-abortion. Yeah, they have. They've fought against bills that would have abolished abortion, and like the one in Texas, that was super shocking because you had like Abby Johnson, who's like a big pro-life star there, and she was against it. So that was when I first started thinking about that and what is going on. And there's so much that could be said about it because it is an industry, like the pro-life industry. I think there's a lot of salaries, and these organizations are like, some of them are multi-million organizations. And if abortion were to end,
their jobs
then
would
they
go
wouldn't
away.
have jobs anymore. Seriously, it's really messed up when you start digging into it. But the fact that they have been the ones going after these bills of abolition in the States is really eye-opening. Also, the fact that they're so intertwined with, they want to be pro-life, right? And so that doesn't mean just abortion, which people say to me all the time. They're like, well, okay, you're pro-life, so what are you doing to help the refugees and stuff? And
do you believe in basic income? Yeah.
Right. You have to be helping every single group, and then you can also be validated in fighting abortion. Whereas I'm like, no, I'm just anti-abortion, and this is important enough to be just anti-abortion. But those organizations have gotten into a lot of stuff that are just anti-Christian. Just like pro-LGBTQ stuff. And so it's morphed into something. Whereas they used to be actual anti-abortion organizations, they're not anymore. They're all this other stuff, and they're fighting bills of abolition.
Yeah. Well, it's when you surrender principles, and I'm not familiar with those particular instances, but you see when you surrender when it moves from this is wrong, I'm opposed to this, to you're not allowed to do that, so you do this. Okay, well, that's still fair enough. I am for life, and everyone should be. It's just like, well, okay, but you're not allowed to be against this. And if you're for life, then you're also for education and for income. And okay, we're about this. And then you 10 miles down the road and you're not where you began.
Yeah. It's a cop-out. That's all it is.
It's a red herring argument. Yeah. I mean, we gave the example that one. It's like if I was living in the Deep South and I said we should stop lynching slaves, and someone was like, look, if you were really pro-freedom, then you would be providing a job and an education. And that's like, okay, one, I don't need to be able to provide work and employment and education in order to know that lynching is wrong, for one. Second, why did you feel compelled to just argue with me over this? Yeah. Like anyone who said that, you'd be like, oh, you're a racist, right? It's like, that's a very disingenuous argument. It's like, hey, I don't think we should kill babies. Oh, but are you going to actually make sure their mom has food for them? It's like, okay.
No, the right way to make that argument would be, yeah, let's stop lynching them and let's do something for afterwards so that they have jobs.
Yeah.
That would be the right way to do it.
Yeah.
But not, you shouldn't believe that because you're not doing this other stuff.
Yeah. And it's like, what, should we lynch them if we can't provide jobs for them? Like, what are you even saying?
Yeah.
But that's the rhetoric. That's the world says that. And I have heard Christians say that kind of thing too. It's like, well, we want to be, I think the Gospel Coalition hosted this conversation. I didn't listen to it, the American one, about pro-life. Should we be like narrowly about abortion, or should we be, kind of cradle to grave type of situation? So you see this seeping in all over the place. Yeah. Right? It's like, why do I have to choose between those?
I saw that, but I also saw that it was from the Gospel Coalition, so I just ignored it.
Yeah, so did I.
Do you have any last words? Maybe give us ways we can donate or help or be a part of what you're doing.
Well, people can really help us by sharing our stuff online.
Great.
It's, as I mentioned, we can't do anything about that except for just rely on people to help sharing our stuff. Yes. And especially our videos. And if you want to take a step and start speaking about abortion online, go ahead, try posting one of our videos and then see what happens,
yeah.
Within your own sphere.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah. We have ways to donate through our website. And we do use that money for helping moms, paying rent, buying groceries, paying for babysitting, paying medical bills, all that kind of stuff. Actually helping them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Front
exactly.
lines.
So we, that's completely donor funded, which is amazing. And just start speaking about abortion. And I think it would be cool, if people would specifically ask their pastor about abortion. And we're actually just about to put up a page on our site that's for Christians. And there's a letter written from a Texas pastor, John Speed, to pastors, specifically here in Canada, about basically that they're not doing anything and what are you guys doing? So I think it would be awesome if people could direct their pastors to our site, to that page. We're going to have more information on there, and kind of I just hope there's a wake-up call within the church. That's what I'm hoping for. And as you said, a revival, that's what we need to be able to have this wake-up call.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being with us. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, we'll do it again sometime. But do you have any last words, Al?
No, we're just super appreciative. I mean, it's so encouraging to hear not just that you're willing to be in the fight, but the Lord and his providence has given you just an open door to a place that's been so hard to reach, to the women who need it most. And we need to pray for these women. As much as we are certain that this is murder, the good news of the gospel is that God, through Jesus, forgives murderers. Amen. And praise God. And for that, I mean, apart from his grace, we would be in the literally the same place, which is under his wrath. And the good news that we can offer to all of these women is that they can be forgiven even for the most heinous crimes. And that's an amazing thing. And it's such a better message than do what you want and be what you want and destroy anyone who stands in your way. It's you've been called to live not for yourself, but for God and for others. And even though you failed, God has sent his son to live the life you ought to have lived, to die the death that you deserve so that you can be forgiven and set free from that. And then now you live and stand and speak on behalf of the same people that you once oppressed. Who doesn't want that, right? It's an amazing message, and we need to get that word out there. So hop online, support Choice42, and pray for Laura, pray for the people who work with her and for the women they interact with, and pray for the churches and the loss, that there be a revival, that God would raise up people, save people, cause people to be born again, that they would care about this.
Amen. Well, thanks to Laura, and thanks for all you for joining us. I'll leave you with this. May he have dominion from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. May all kings fall down before him, all nations serve him. We'll see you next time.